Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today I have the pleasure of showcasing a brand new game on the channel releasing in just over a month on the 4th of December. Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden is based off the tabletop RPG system and universe of Mutant Year Zero, a post-apocalyptic future where everybody is a mutant in the aftermath of a war that has led to the end of humanity as we know it.
Damn, I'm good.
Before I begin, please note that the game was given to me by the developers for free to take a look at in this preview build. Full disclosure. So big thanks to the Bearded Ladies Consulting and Funcom for that. And before we dive in, I just want to mention that if you're interested in buying the game, consider picking it up using the Humble Bundle affiliate link to support the channel and charity as you do. It's in the video description below and under the eye at the top right corner of this screen. Anyway, enough of an intro. With all of that in mind, and keeping in mind that this is an early build, anything you see might be a touch buggy, and it is pre-release, let's dive in. In Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden, we take control of our party of mutants in a quest headed toward a mythical far-off haven that most don't even believe exists: Eden. For this preview build, we had access to about 3 or so hours of progression, allowing us to experience an interesting variety of enemy types, play around with the core mechanics of the game, and get an understanding for the tone of the game.
Come on.
That's funny. I think you've mistaken me for someone who gives a duck.
I'll release all of my gameplay footage this weekend or perhaps early next week, but today I want to give a brief overview of my experience, of what I think about the game, how I feel it might turn out, its mechanics, its systems, its visuals, things like that, and give you a brief overview of what you can expect. The game is split into 2 distinct gameplay modes, and this really is what sets it apart from most tactical, turn-based strategy XCOM-like games. It is, after all, a tactical adventure RPG more than it is a tactical turn-based strategy XCOM-like game. Both parts are very well executed, and both parts tie together very nicely as well. So for the majority of the game, you're going to be playing in more of a third-person adventure RPG sort of a mode. This has your characters engaging in conversations as they traverse through the lands, going sector by sector, looking to complete the task at hand, whatever it might be at the time. To clarify, this is not an open-world game. Instead, each sector has been handcrafted and built to ensure a fairly guided experience. While I'm a fan of open-world games, it's often nice to have a more directed experience, and this is one of those cases. It's very nicely executed. Even though this makes things somewhat linear in any given sector, there's still room for discovery and exploration. In fact, at one point I could literally go off the beaten path, and that was at least once in this early build. I must have missed a couple opportunities potentially, and it did allow me to get into an encounter with these mutant dogs that I would otherwise have completely missed, and it also allowed me to get this snazzy top hat that, again, I would have otherwise completely missed as well. Some sectors will also have enemies that you're nowhere near capable of taking on yet, giving you a reason to go back and potentially get more loot afterwards when you've leveled up, and some sectors are actually completely locked off until you reach a certain level for your characters. So, despite it not being an open-world game, there's still reason to explore and backtrack and return to old haunts to take on new challenges and find new things. As you go around, you'll be collecting loot of a few different categories. Scrap is the currency for shopping, gun parts let you upgrade weapon stats, gun mods help add abilities or buffs to your weapons, and a variety of armor or grenades or tools such as medkits can be found as well. As all this looting happens, you'll want to occasionally head back to your home, the Ark, for upgrades and mods. Now I hesitate to call it your headquarters because it isn't your headquarters. The Ark is just where you live among many other mutants. It's where you shop for things, apply upgrades to your equipment, get drunk, get missions. You don't own it, you don't control it, you just use it as a hub world of sorts. So again, this is more of an action-adventure RPG angle. As you go around, you'll also come across not-so-friendly denizens of the Zone, the area that is infected and home to a variety of ghouls and other monsters. This is where things get really interesting, in my opinion. Most games immediately go into a turn-based mode, even if you haven't actually engaged with the enemy yet. Battletech, Phantom Doctrine, XCOM, Phoenix Point, great games as they are, these are all good examples of what I mean right now. Here, however, the only time you're snapped into a turn-based tactical mode is if you get spotted first.
My disciples, come to me!
Otherwise, you maintain control of the situation in a fluid, real-time, third-person, adventure-style game. You can move around as you wish, going, wherever you want in the sector, off the path, on the path, looking for loot, and you're probably going to turn your flashlight off when you get close to the enemy because this makes it a lot easier for you to sneak around. It reduces how far they can see or hear you from. You can split the party up as well and set them up in forms of an ambush, so you can come in from multiple angles, and you can watch and react to the enemy in real time. Learn their patrols, learn their patterns, find a way to isolate the dangerous ones, and then pick them off early before you engage more. And when you go to pick them off, you might quietly eliminate the enemy without anybody seeing them die.
Stay back!
Sorry about that.
Woo! Yeah!
Or you might fail and trigger an engagement, and that's when the tactical turn-based system really kicks in. And that's when the game starts to kick the player around in my favorite way. Tactical engagements are no joke. They are not forgiving, they are very deadly. The average health bar is tiny, easily halved in one shot, if not worse. The same goes both ways, though the enemy is almost always more numerous. Using half or full cover, you'll want to try and keep yourself a safe distance away, while still trying to stay close enough to accurately use your weapon. Accuracy seems like it moves in 25% increments, so it goes from 100% to 75% to 50% and so on. So being a tile to the left or right can be the difference between a killing blow and an embarrassing miss that turns into a total party kill. On top of that, weapons need reloading often, and with only 2 action points split between everything you want to do, you have to be very picky of when and where you shoot from. This forces you to choose your engagements wisely. It forces you to position yourself before you trigger a potential firefight, and these were the most thrilling moments of the game. When I was first playing, rather recklessly, I very quickly learned to take my time before starting a shootout. Never did I feel like I could just coast, and this was at the recommended or medium difficulty where hit points and skills don't actually regenerate between engagements unless a med kit is used, particularly for hit points. So that was pretty tense. I would get into a firefight and I had to make sure that I preserved my health, because if I lost any, I would carry that damage over to the next engagement and the next sector, and it got very difficult increasingly as time went on. And like I was saying, it is very unforgiving. You're often outnumbered, and you can quite easily be outgunned as well. I loved it. Now the tension only gets higher when in Iron Man mode, or Iron Mutant mode as this game calls it, where it autosaves every turn during combat and after combat, doesn't allow to manually save at all, and it opens up permadeath for your characters as well. I got to see a decent variety of enemy types as well. There are the melee grunts, the ranged grunts, the sharpshooters, the ones that call in reinforcements, the healer bot, What I mean to say is, there's a great deal of variety, even in the opening few hours. I didn't feel like I was grinding through grunts to get to one big boss fight and then unlock a whole slew of new enemies, and this helped a lot with pacing. And pacing is actually where I think the biggest problem currently lies, a problem that can be readily fixed though. I just wish the characters, for example, moved a touch faster in exploration mode, and I do wish there was more to discover off the beaten path. I feel like all of this might actually open up in later sections of the game, so I'm not holding it against the first few hours of gameplay. But as somebody who's familiar with the genre, I felt bogged down by the kind of slow introduction of new mechanics, but mechanics I'm already familiar with because it's similar to other games I play often. It was also a lot more of a directed opening. It felt a bit more linear than I'd typically like, and the slowish character movement, even outside of stealth mode, made me not really want to explore every nook and cranny at times, and that was to the detriment of my whole experience. Again though, with that said, I can see how that might change an hour or two more into the game. In fact, comparing the first 40 or so minutes of the game to the next 40 or so minutes of the game, it did really change, and so it's very possible that the game ramps up very quickly to this very cool, open-ish world where you want to go around and explore, and it's all fast-paced and intense, constant action, balanced nicely with the stealth. So again, I'm holding my judgment until I'm able to actually play more of the game, all of the game, which is what a review is for. So this is just a preview, nothing set in stone just yet, obviously. And again though, with all of this said, I can see how with an hour or two more into the game, it's very possible we're going to see branching paths, multiple approaches, and really pushing the player to explore the setting. Another concern I have is actually with the character progression system. When you gain enough XP, you level up, as is the norm. The points you earn can be used to gain mutations, major or minor. These are just skills that you're upgrading. Calling them mutation is just a bit of flavor fitting the environment and the setting of the game, of course. Now, it is pretty cool that the mutations do at times physically modify your model, so that's neat. But apart from that, apart from sort of these standard of fare things, where my concern rises is in how limited the breadth of these mutations were. Each character seems to have their own unique tree, but I hesitate to call it a tree. It's more like a river. It splits at parts, and then rejoins, and then it splits again, only to all end up at the same spot, like a lake, if you will. Now, each character has a unique flavor, for the most part, but I wish that the decisions made with character progression felt like they had more weight. I wish things would get locked out, or things would take more time to get to, depending on the decisions I make along branching paths. That would bring the RPG side of things to life. I imagine this maybe as a callback to the tabletop system the game is based off of. I don't know, I haven't played that tabletop system, and honestly I do think that many people will like it. It's just not my preference, so let's keep that in mind as well. Now, outside of that, I was very happy to see that kitting out my party actually mattered, both from a stats perspective, of course, and from a visual perspective as well. It really allowed me to gain some ownership over the individuals, and how I kitted them out, and how it changed when they were wearing armor, or wearing a top hat, as the case might be. It was neat. I was also glad to see quite clearly communicated the roles that each character seemed to fit into. It wasn't hard for me to get into the right mindset with each character either. Now, on the topic of character, boy does this game have some.
No, there's nothing out there. It's the zoo. And stop calling me ugly face. Look at you all face. I can't look at my face, it's my face. Now put your eyes out there and look for intruders.
Between the fully voice-acted game and cinematics, the great art style, and the beautiful visuals, the most standout aesthetic aspect of the game to me was just how characterful it is. The game is not afraid to have fun. The banter is cute, the characters are a joy, the puns are plentiful, and the writing is honestly top-notch. The way these mutants look at ancient artifacts like boomboxes or telescopes and talk about them is hilarious in its childlike reverence.
Elder Almighty, I've seen some crazy shit in the zone, but this takes the bullet. This house must have belonged to some small people. I mean, small. That is just the weirdest.
Even the written descriptions of items are hilarious. They're chronicled by other like-minded mutants who don't necessarily know what they're talking about, and that really reveals or provides some insight, I suppose, to the world and adds some character where, in many cases, it isn't done or it's not really necessary, so I loved it. Kudos to whoever did this. I got some hearty chuckles out of item descriptions in an RPG. That rarely happens. Even the weapon mods and upgrades had me curiously looking for what real-world reference they were making. I think there's a power tool, for example, that doubles as a way of getting additional knockback power out of your gun. So stuff like that is just cropping up. It's very cool to see the world sort of come to life this way. The enemies have personality as well, commenting on combat as it unfolds, calling your mutants various names, and making references to them as they're about to go attack them, for example, calling them swine or the feathered one. It's all very alive, and on top of that, yes, the game is beautiful, and the sound design is fantastic, and the models and animations and VFX are all great. I love the look of the environment, especially beautifully moonlit with great ambient lighting, suitably creepy and quite chilly looking. So overall, from an aesthetic and a audio-visual perspective, I think this game is really nailing it, doing everything right as it needs to. The writing, I think, is the standout piece, though. It just brings the world to life. Again, I was laughing, on and off here and there. So it's wonderful to see attention being paid to something which sometimes gets glossed over, I find. Now, overall, my experience with Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden has been very promising. We're about a month out of the December 4th release date, and the game is feeling suitably polished. It's a joy to listen to, a pleasure to look at, and fun to play. Outside of a few minor issues that I mentioned, with one of them being easily fixed and the other being a matter of personal preference, I feel like this is going to be one to watch out for. I definitely will reserve final judgment until I'm able to play a little further on to make a call on some important elements. Exploration, pacing, variety, and longevity being the key ones. So far, things are quite promising. I'm hoping to get an early build of the final game when the time comes so that I can do a full-fledged review on the channel. As of now, I look forward to checking out the Ark Hub World of Mutant Year Zero. As always, remember to subscribe to this channel for more strategy gaming content, including reviews, previews, let's plays, and more. Let me know any of your questions down below, and I'll try and answer whatever I can. And remember also that there's full gameplay footage coming out on this channel soon. Perhaps this weekend, perhaps early on next week, and hopefully that'll answer some questions as well. A massive thanks to all of my patrons and channel members for supporting the channel on a month-to-month basis, and a massive thanks to you for watching. Till next time, cheers.